Hi everyone and welcome. Today we're talking about the 5 pillars of Certificate Lifecycle Management. If you've been following us for a while, you might remember we ran a webinar on the 4 pillars of CLM last year, but we want to introduce a 5th pillar. We have Henry Lamb, Manager of Sales Engineering, and Tim Callan, Chief Experience Officer here at Sectiga with us, and they will go over the 4 existing pillars and then also reveal the additional pillar of CLM to you. As always, we're recording the presentation and we'll share it with you after the webinar. And if you've got any questions, we'd love to hear them. Please pop them into the chat function and we'll answer as many as we can at the end. Henry and Tim, over to you.
Thank you, Leah. Hi, Henry. How are you doing today?
All right. Not too bad yourself, Tim?
I'm doing okay. I've got a little bit of a throat thing going on, but hopefully my voice sounds fine for this webinar today. So we'll see. Let's get into it. So we're talking today. So as Leah said, we did have we have introduced this concept before, this framework, if you will, of 4 pillars, and I think today, realistically, in the market, there is an additional pillar that is worth discussing. But before we get into what those are and talking them through, there's some ground state information that it's good for all of us to understand. And the first thing that's very important is that we live in a world of shrinking certificate lifespans. And it's all kinds of certificates in all kinds of ways, but we've seen a very steady trend of certificate lifespans getting shorter and shorter. This has been going on for years. There is no sign of it stopping, and I at least am predicting that this is going to go on for years to come. Do you agree, Henry?
Very much. It's the line that's trending down at this moment in time to shrink the life cycle of certificates.
Yeah, and one big news item, of course, on this is that the Google Chromium root store project has announced that it intends to enforce sometime in the future a maximum duration, a maximum term for a public SSL certificate of 90 days. This is as opposed to the 398 days that we have today. So that's taking us basically from 1 year to 1 quarter, less than a quarter, 90 days. And that's a big driver of this, but we've seen it in all kinds of ways. We've seen the maximum term of SMIME certificates get shorter. We've seen the maximum term of roots get shorter. This is just one in a series of reductions in TLS. And again, I think that we're going to continue to see this. And there's really good reasons for that. At the end of the day, SSL certificates or shorter-lived certificates are just plain safer. They're safer for a variety of reasons. They're safer because what we would call your risk window goes down, right? If a certificate is misissued or flawed, or if a private key is stolen, the amount of time that someone can do something with it is just less. If the certificate is shorter, there's just less exposure. And it promotes more agility, which is very important. As cryptography needs to change over time, to be able to make that agility occur faster is very beneficial. And so, that's the real driving force behind this. And there's every reason to believe that that's going to continue. And in fact, by point of fact, today, more than 90% of the active TLS certificates that we issue publicly on our public trusted routes are 90 days or less in term. So this is a very real trend that's really happening in a big way, right?
Very much, very much.
And one of the important things to be aware of that's also true much more now than in the past is that we live in an era where unforeseen events can force certificate replacement to occur in a must-have way that happens like right now. And a good example of this is if we look at a variety of incidents in the last years. In recent years, we've seen where suddenly large tranches of certificates have had to be replaced in enterprises or other organizations around the world And a good example is, so in March 2021, let me just walk through down this list of examples. March 2021, a security researcher posted a message on a message board about private keys being exposed, and this led to a variety of people picking away at it and following the same basic techniques. They found many, many, many private keys that affected a total of millions of public certificates. And as soon as these private keys were found, there was no way around it, right? They had to be revoked. And so these are companies that had their private keys sitting out in a way where they could be discovered and they weren't aware of it. And the public wasn't aware of it. But then once the public became aware of it and CAs became aware of it, we knew that these private keys were not safe and those certificates had to be revoked. So these are people who suddenly had an event, right? And all of a sudden, a whole bunch of my certs are going to be revoked in 24 hours. And there's nothing I can say to have it not happen. And you might say, well, my private keys aren't exposed. Well, these companies didn't think theirs were either, right? So these are the kinds of surprises that can happen to us. Then there are also major things, certificate misissuance occurrences. And so probably the best example of this was the 63-bit serial number entropy problem. This happened in, I think, 2021, maybe 2020, somewhere around there. Again, a researcher started looking into various serial numbers for CAs, and there's a rule, according to the CA browser forum, that a certificate serial number needs to have a lot of entropy in it. It needs to be unpredictable, and it needs to have 64 bits of entropy, right? So you have to have 64 1-0s in a row where it's unpredictable whether or not they're a 1 or a 0. And it was found that a popular tool, JBCA, Java Bean CA, that was often used to generate serial numbers for certificates was always setting the first bit to 0. So if you generated a 64-bit number and the first bit is set to 0, then that's predictable. That is not entropy. And because it's not entropy, how many bits does that leave me with
60,
Henry?
63.
63, not enough.
Not enough. Yep.
Right? Half as much entropy as you're supposed to have.
Yep.
Right, remember, it's binary. Every time you lose a bit, you lose half.
Yep.
And so that was not okay. Now, Sectigo was unaffected as it happens. So a number of CAs were unaffected, but literally millions of certificates had to be revoked within 5 days from when this was discovered. Again, if you are the subscriber, this isn't necessarily anything you can predict. This is not your fault. But when it occurs, too bad, so sad. Your certificates are being revoked and there's nothing you can do about it, right? 0-day vulnerabilities are a big one. Heartbleed is probably the best one to talk about here, right? Heartbleed came along in 2012. We found that there was a 0-day vulnerability in OpenSSL, and that you could actually, pretty sure it was OpenSSL, and you could actually get the private key for a certificate sitting on a server, and there was no way to know if somebody had gotten your private key, had mined your private key. And as a consequence, every certificate that had ever sat on any affected system had to be assumed to have a compromised private key. And the revocation needs were massive. New advances occur in cryptography attacks all the time. Like it might be that right now there's a genius standing on a whiteboard figuring out a new way to break something, and that we're going to find out about it tomorrow. Or it might be that there's a new 0-day that we're going to find out about tomorrow. And then even if all of this doesn't affect you, we know that quantum computers are going to break RSA and ECC. And this isn't the subject of this podcast, of this webinar today, but we've talked about in the past. We will again. And the fact is that quantum computers just foundationally will crush the existing encryption that we have. And what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to swap out our encryption for something entirely different. So all of these are examples of how you as a subscriber might wake up one morning and find out that you have a massive revocation event on your hands that you weren't expecting, and that isn't really in your control.
And that's the reality, to your
Yeah.
point. It's going to
Yeah.
be a shock to everyone's system if and when that day happens.
Right. And so this means that we have a need for the ability to rapidly replace our certificates. This is something that we call certificate agility. And the basic idea behind certificate agility is it's like crypto agility. It's the same concept as crypto agility, but applied to your certificates. You need to be able to replace any and all of your certificates in your environment at any time. And if you have total certificate agility, that's something you can do. And if you can't do that, you don't have total certificate agility, right? It's just a definition of the term. And this replacement needs to be accurate, needs to be error-free, correctly done, immediate, because stolen private key could be exploited right now. Got to do this right now. Needs to be precise down to the individual certificate. If there's one certificate that's a problem, you need to be able to shoot that one certificate without having to shoot others. But it could be up to and including all your certificates. Maybe it's the whole bunch. Maybe it's one of these earlier Hypebleed style events where you need to replace everything. And you need to be verifiable. You need to be able to go back and say, I know that I've done this. I know that it was done correctly. I can go back and look later. I can provide a report to my management or my auditor or the customer with whom I have an SLA. And all of that has to be done. If you can't do this, you don't have certificate agility. And if you don't have total certificate agility, that represents risk. That represents vulnerability. And so what certificate management, CLM, ultimately does is it aids your ability to provide certificate agility. And if we want to do that, there are a few steps to certificate agility. The first one is visibility. You got to know they exist. You got to know what certificates you have and where they are and what they look like. And if you don't know that, can't swap them out, right? Mm-hmm. And then from there, you've got to be able to provision them. You got to be able to obtain a new certificate and install them, right? If you get certificates, but then you have to go put them on your servers manually, that is not going to give you the agility you need. It's fine for one cert, maybe, but it's not fine for large tranches of certs. And then,
that, Tim, if you have to add a human into it, there could be errors along the way, which then you introduce additional risk that you're not aware of.
That's a great point, Henry. As soon as humans are going and doing these installations, there could be an error. They could install it wrong. They could install the wrong cert. They could think they installed it, but they didn't, right? It's on somebody's to-do list that somebody doesn't get their to-do list. You check it off as being done, but it doesn't actually get done. All of these things can occur. And then also beware of built-in restrictions. So certificate pinning is fundamentally anti-agile and it's fragile. And it is not something that we recommend. And we routinely see people get in trouble because they pin. And likewise, if you start monkeying around with your root store, removing roots, or if you start using non-standard certificate chains, these are also fragile, anti-agile decisions that can get you in trouble. So these are dangerous games, pinning, messing with root stores, and messing with certificate chains. And you may do this and be fine today, but when changes occur, that's when these things create problems for enterprises.
And to add to that, Tim, when the 90-day certificate comes in, pinning has little reason behind pinning the certificate anymore, because the idea of pinning was for having the cert available for 398 days. But if it goes down to 90 days, you may need to do that 5 times a year or 6 times a year, which creates 6 times the amount of headache.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've given whole webinars on the consequences of 90-day certs when they come, and I'm sure we'll give more in the future. So you could definitely go read those, but one of the big ones is just that your workload is going to increase, like Henry says, 5 to 6x. And what might have been manageable when you were doing it once a year is going to be awfully hard when you're doing it, let's say, every 2 months. And so with that, that really brings in the concept of certificate lifecycle management. And then this is where our framework comes in, the 5 pillars. This is the 5 key things that you get from a CLM solution that will help you achieve the goals that we talked about in the previous slides. So there's 5 pillars, and then there's a capstone that sits on top. And so there, I'll just bring them all out. So there's 5 pillars in the capstone, and that's because the pillars make the capstone possible, and the capstone also holds up the pillars. They work together, right, to strengthen each other. And so these pillars, and we'll go into detail on what they are, but the 5 pillars are deployment, discover, discovery, revoke and replace, renew, and orchestration. And then all of these are aided by and aid visibility on your certificates. And we'll get into detail of what all of those are. But before we do that, there's some general considerations that span all of these pillars that are part of the whole framework that you want to think about when you're thinking about the value and the power of a CLM solution for you. And the first one is just certificate types that are supported, right? So the full set of certificate types that you're going to use in your enterprise now or in the future, or maybe using without knowing it, are the certificate types that you want this solution to support. So this is both public and private routes. This is various types of certs I listed here: SSL code signing, SMIME document signing, client certs, right? There could be more. And the various authentication levels that might be possible. So on the TLS world, that's EV, OV, and DV. In the SMIME world, that can be mailbox or sponsored or exactly, right, exactly, org validated. And so those various levels of authentication are also different things you might use. And a CLM that supports some of them but not all of them will have less than pure usefulness for you, right? And maybe it's okay. Maybe the cert volume that it supports is 98% of them and you're willing to struggle through the other 2%. But you just need to know that, right? You need to go in with your eyes open to say, does this work with the certificate types that I want to use, right? Yes or no. Or that I might want to use in the future, right? You also want to think about future proofing, which is maybe I don't use any of these certs today, but maybe I'll use them in the future. And if I do, or I might use them, right? Or SMIME sponsored certs. And if I might use them in the future and I don't have that ability, when that time comes, it's going to be painful, right? And so that's also a good thing to think about. But PKI is more than just certificates. So for instance, private CAs, key escrow, other things that are part of your PKI lifecycle or your whole PKI ecosystem that aren't necessarily just certificates are also part of what you need to consider when you're thinking about what you're going to get out of a CLM. And then these last 4 things I think are just always good for any SaaS, mission critical SaaS operation, right? Or mission critical software. You want high availability. You want it to be, have uptime and be available and do its work when you need it to. You want it to be reliable, secure, and meet your compliance needs. And so available, reliable, secure, compliant. These are just like general considerations when you think about any CLM solution at all before we even get into the pillars. Want to add to that, Henry?
You cover all of it, Mr. Keller.
All righty. All right. So the 5 pillars. The first one is deployment. Deploy. So in terms of deployment, the capabilities we're looking for, first of all, you got to order and issue a certificate, right? Pure and simple. This is what's basically for. It's got to take certificates and it's got to get them. So get a certificate from your CA, either order it from your public CA or pull it from your private CA or your MSCA, right? And then install it. That's the second half. So are we going to actually get this and put it on the server in the right place, in the right way, know that it's done correctly so the cert is running. And Henry, we've got a few options for installing, right?
Yep, you can do it agent-based, which is something that can be developed by an individual, an organization that could take that certificate and install it at the endpoint, end-to-end, install it properly and validate it to make sure it's done to prevent human error. And in other cases, you could use APIs or protocol-based. So therefore, if you don't want something custom, you could use a standard protocol to do the request for the given system that needs a cert and then have it install it as well.
Now, for agent-based, that means that my agent's going to have to be installed locally, right?
It can be. In some cases, yes. In other cases, if the agent is robust enough, it could be installed on a remote system that can connect to a remote server as well.
Okay, cool. And of course, the protocol-based solutions don't require an agent at all. That's what's so good about them.
Correct. It's a standard protocol. You can't mess it up unless you mess up the implementation of the protocol.
Yeah, and Acme is the main one here, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, Acme support. At this point, I'm just going to say this. At this point, at this stage in human history, if your CLM is not supporting Acme, that's a problem. It just is, right? Acme is the most common protocol. Support is vast and sweeping, and you can find lots of things that will be solved by Acme for you. And you need a CLM that supports Acme, or that's just a problem, right? But that's what we do. So what are the benefits? I'm going to contend that the first benefit is not efficiency. You might think, oh, efficiency. I don't have to sit and do these installs. I think the first benefit, the biggest benefit, is that you can count on the fact that those installations are done correctly. Do you agree?
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah, it's consistent, like I said here, consistent, compliant, predictable. You know that you're not going to have an error or a problem later, right? That's the main thing. After that, absolutely, it's much more efficient. You know, your very precious IT professionals who have a lot of great things they can be doing for the company are not sitting and spending their time installing certificates. They can spend their time on something else, right? Which is fantastic. There's an opportunity cost win here. And then the last point, and this is maybe not so obvious, but I think it's very valuable, is if your CLM is deploying your certificates, then that means your CLM has your certificates in the system. And because of that, all the other pillars automatically, and the visibility capstone, automatically apply to this particular certificate. So when your CLM deploys a certificate, now the certificate is automatically inside the CLM system. And that is fundamentally good. The more of your certificates that are in there, the better off you are. Right?
Absolutely.
So the next pillar is discovery. What's discovery, Henry?
Basically to find out where all your certs are.
Yeah.
That's the simple term.
If you don't know about them, you can't manage them.
It becomes your blind spot, which becomes your risk. Yes.
And we see outages. We see headlines. All year long, we see headlines of outages from major best-of-breed tech-savvy companies. This year, it included Microsoft Office 365, right? It included other major tech brands.
Bank of Ireland was one.
Bank of Ireland. What was the satellite service?
Starlink.
Starlink, thank you. Starlink, like these are sophisticated operations. Major banks, Starlink, Microsoft, and these outages occur because a certificate doesn't get renewed, right?
Yep.
And so if you have certificates that you don't know about, then that's a major problem. They can fail to get renewed, and then things will go down. So yeah, discovery basically to be able to search your domain space or your network for certificates or your environment, find them and bring them into the CLM is incredibly valuable. And the more comprehensive and effective your CLM is in finding these certs, the more valuable it becomes, right?
Very much.
And yeah, and then of course, one of the other things, it's not just bringing them under management. It also gives you a chance, if you have certain standards or requirements for your certificates, it gives you a chance to make sure that the certificates you're bringing in do meet your requirements, right? Because as you get visibility on them, we'll get to this, but you'll be able to see things like key sizes and stuff like that. So you'll be able to know, are these certificates that we're okay with? Are these certificates we're willing to use in the first place? So that's another advantage of discovery. Like if there's a certificate out there that is using a non-compliant, let's say the key length is too small, how do you know about it? How do you know that that's a real error, a real problem, a real risk? Well, with discovery, now you know about it, right? And you can do something about it.
Very much.
Benefits of discovery, Henry?
It's same thing to prevent outages and become
Outages, outages. This is going to become the broken record of this webinar. Every time we're going to say outages. The main thing, of course, expired certs, as I already said, unforeseen certificate expirations cause so much downtime. Still, near the end of 2023, unforeseen certificate expirations are causing so much downtime for services. And if you can mitigate that or eliminate that, the benefit is vast. And that's what you get, that's what discovery will give you, because it'll find those certificates and pull them in. And again, the more effective your discovery is in finding, the better off that CLM is working for you. But there's other benefits too, right? Like, when your renewals are going to happen and you can plan for them, right? Okay, these are when the renewals are coming. I got to keep an eye on it. Or, gee, I got a whole swath of certificates. They're all supposed to renew at the same time. Maybe I'll space them out. There's a variety of things you can do now to manage it once you're aware that this is coming on. You can optimize your spend, right? If I've got a bunch of onesie twosies that are being bought at rack rate and I can fold them into my corporate purchasing, I can just plain get a better per certificate price. So it just helps you make your money go further. And then again, governance. If you are a company that has specific rules, and some people will say, you know what, if it's good enough for the CA browser form, it's good enough for me. So you're for public certs, that's fine. But some companies won't, right? Those specific requirements beyond that. Or for your private certificates, right? Who knows? Your private certificates can be anything. They can be however they're configured. So now you need to say, do these meet the minimum requirements that we have for security? And discovery helps you see these certificates and you're aware that they're there, and you can check on what they are.
And to highlight, Tim, the governance piece is still prevalent today because customers that I talk to actually still have problems with that internally because they don't follow guidelines.
Absolutely. And sometimes the problems are just security risks. Sometimes the problems are interoperability. Sometimes the problems are compliance with other obligations that you have. Those are all areas where you can have an issue where you need governance in place. Revoke and replace. This is fairly straightforward. Sometimes we need to revoke a cert. And it's just much nicer and easier to do it inside of a CLM. And as I said before, this goes back to our certificate agility discussion. You might need to just pinpoint the very individual cert or set of certs you need to be able to do. Sometimes it has to be a large volume of certs. Sometimes you need to search for certs with a certain property, and it's all of these. And all of this can be done in a CLM that has robust revoke and replace capability. And then that's not just revoking, but that's also getting the new certificate installed so you keep running. And that's where we look at what we talked about before. The issuance and installation needs to be part of this as well. Yeah. And so again, what are the benefits? Well, first of all, revocation gets done and it gets done correctly, right? And it's the certs that need to be revoked and not the certs that don't. And then that can help you just be more robust and more secure and more compliant. And then in addition to that, those replacement certs need to be provisioned, need to be installed, and all that needs to be done correctly. And if you've got a system that's doing that, that's doing your provisioning and installation for you, you literally hit a button and the whole thing occurs, that cert's revoked and the new cert is installed. That is the best possible world from an automation perspective. And then of course, as always, this is just a more efficient use of your employees' time, right? Your valuable employees can do other things.
Yeah, no more mundane task.
Yeah, we talk about the skills gap a lot, right? For the last 2 decades, every time anybody researches this, they find out that institutions across the globe feel they do not have and cannot get the set of skilled IT employees that they need.
Yeah.
And it's because digital systems have grown faster than the job pool has grown, right? It takes 4 years for someone to get a college degree, and you just can't churn them out fast enough. And so as a consequence, we're all filling a skills gap. And one of the ways that you can address the skills gap is you take those very, very valuable humans with their unique capabilities and you have them doing the things that only valuable humans with their unique capabilities can do. And the things that a computer can do for you, you give over to an automated system. And that's one of the big strategies to deal with the skills gap, and it's definitely part of the CLM benefit set for sure. Okay, renew. Once upon a time, this was our last pillar. Then we'll get to the new one there, orchestration, which will be fun. Renew. So renewal. Henry, you know what I like to say? Every certificate expires.
Absolutely.
Every certificate expires. And what happens when they expire?
They knocked out on the system, and you
Bad things.
Bad things. The headline.
Yep, absolutely right. Every certificate expires. So renewal, this is one of the most important parts of CLM is have your certificates. They're in there. You're tracking them. You know when they're going to expire. You have automatic actions taken, right? Ideally, it is provision a new certificate and install it prior to the expiration of the old one. Sometimes it's something you don't need anymore. Sometimes it's a service that you've sunsetted, in which case you might want to be able to select certain certs and say, don't renew these, and that's fine too, right? But you need to have that in your control. It needs to show you when they're coming, when are my renewals coming, what am I going to do, which ones are going to be automatically installed for me, which one are going to require manual work. Did that manual work get done? Is the new certificate in there yet? All of that is stuff that a CLM can and should do for you. In an ideal world, it all just runs smoothly and you can nearly set it and forget it. You never want to forget it, but just keep an eye on it rather than having to sit and do a whole lot of manual work to keep it running.
Yep.
And so what are the benefits? First benefit?
Outage prevention.
Outages. Yes, this is the big one. This is the big one. And second benefit?
Employee time, efficiency.
Employee time, 100%, right? It's the same thing we talked about. So, prevent those outages and use your employees much better. This is 90% of what you're getting out of your CLM is those two things, and rightly so. And the other 10% is very valuable and important, but these are the two big headline items. And then the last thing that comes with renewal is that as practices change, a CLM can make sure that your certificates are automatically compliant and current. So let's say that we decide that we need on our private CA, we decide that we're going to deprecate a shorter key length and move to a longer key length. We can set that in our CLM, and then as new certificates are being obtained from our private CA and issued, it will start obtaining them using the new rules and not the old rules, right? And cycle them out over time. So that's the kind of thing that you can get when you have an automated renewal system. You put your rules in, and then those rules just get rolled out as you're going through renewal. And you don't have gaps. You don't have people missing it. You don't have someone saying, oh, I didn't get the memo. I didn't realize we were doing that now, right?
Yep.
Yep. All right. Now we've added a fifth pillar, as we talked about. And this pillar is orchestration. What we mean by orchestration is that your CLM needs to integrate with your greater company technology stack. So you have a variety of systems you're using to manage and monitor and optimize how your system is running. And it may be APM, it may be SIM, it may be BI tools, it may be alerting tools. And all of these things need to coordinate with each other. You may have a broader security fabric. You may have an ITSM solution like ServiceNow. And in all of these cases, you need to, your CLM wants to connect to those things for both systems to help each other, right? This is what we mean by a two-way flow. So I might want to sit inside of my ISTM and give commands that the CLM is going to execute on. Or I might want the CLM to discover certs and push them into the ISTM so I can see it. Right?
Yep.
I want to, if I have an alert, if I have a cert that's coming up for expiration and nothing's been done with it, or it's not being able to managed manually, sure, I want an alert to sit inside the CLM, but I also might want that alert to pop up in PagerDuty. And so being able to have that two-way flow is an enormous part, and being able to tap into the broader ecosystem of platforms and point solutions that you're really depending on to make your systems run correctly is definitely one of the pillars of CLM. Right, Henry?
Very much. Very
You want to
much.
add to that?
Well, the other part too is to add for the ITSM use case, you wanted to have a potential way to have your end constituents can trigger the request as well at the end of the day as they
There you
make
go.
for the system itself.
Fantastic. Absolutely. I think that's a great point, right? And in fact, you're touching on one of the benefits here, right? So what are the benefits, right? So increase control throughout your entire technology stack, right? And just generally reduction of your exposure and risk by using the variety of tools that you have in place to take care of that. Once again, reduce manual work. But this point you just said, I think is very important, is work with the people in the place and the way that they choose to do their work.
Yes.
Right? So rather than forcing them to go to a different console, do a different login, and take actions, to the degree that you can make those actions visible for people where they're doing their work, that is very beneficial to implementation, to accuracy, to full execution, and to human efficiency.
On top, to also adopt the automation and not make it not alienate them as well.
I love it. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point, right? Get buy-in. Get the people who need to do this work to understand why it matters and what they need to do and do it correctly. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You know, in particular, I think there's also a real, it's worth highlighting in particular, pushing alerts, right? If there is a problem and the CLM is there to detect the problem, and the people who need to act on the problem aren't looking at the CLM, it doesn't do you any good. But if we can push alerts and warnings and notifications to the place where they log in every morning, that's where you get a huge win. Right?
Very much.
Yeah. So that's a big part of the whole orchestration need and story. So, and then lastly, of course, sitting on top of all that's visibility. So like we talked about, visibility makes these things possible and vice versa. So, you know, part of what you get with visibility, you really get to see your certs. What are my certs? And what are their qualities? And we just listed some of them here. We mentioned some of this, right? What cyber suite are they using? What's their expiration dates, timed expiration? who's the issuing CA, what certificate type is it, etc. So all of that is stuff that you should be able to easily see and act on and work with. And you should be identifying certs that don't fit, that don't meet your requirements or don't meet your expectation, or are soon to expire, or are vulnerable, or are incorrectly installed, or things along those lines. And a good CLM will give you visibility on all of this. And so what are the benefits of that? Well, we get to discover problems before they become problems and fix them before we have a breach or an outage or a compliance error or something along those lines. Like we talked about before, you can plan your certificate usage, right? If you know what you have and you have visibility on it, and it's in one easy place where it's easy to see a dashboard or get a report, now you can do things like you can plan it and you can optimize it, and you can optimize your spend and you can optimize your work time. Demonstrate your security and your compliance, right? Maybe you need to be able to give a report to your C-level executive or to your board of directors or to your industry body that audits you. And now you're going to be able to do that. And then this last one I think is huge, is peace of mind. And I always think of an anecdote when we talk about this, which is some years ago, I was interviewing an SCM, a Certificate Manager customer, for a case study. And I asked, this is the person who is responsible for managing certificates at this company. And I asked her, what's the biggest benefit for you? And I was expecting to say something like reduced downtime or something. And she says, I used to wake up in the morning and the first thing I did was look at email to see what had broken in the night. And now I don't have to do that anymore. I get up, I have my coffee, I talk to my kids, and then I look at email after, right? And it was this peace of mind thing, the sense that I don't spend my whole life wondering what is failing right now and what is going to make my life into an emergency in the next 5 minutes. And for this individual, she felt like this was the best thing she got out of SCM. And I can see why. And so, I think that's an important thing to know as well, that you can have, a much greater degree of confidence that you're not going to be unpleasantly surprised on any given day because of a certificate-related problem that people are going to contend that you should have known about and solved. And if you take these steps, you don't have to have those discussions anymore. You don't have to have those emergencies anymore. And that is a good benefit right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So these are the 5 pillars: visibility, deploy, discover. So deploy, discover, revoke and replace, renew, and now orchestration, the new one. And with a capstone of visibility. And that's how we think about it, and that's how we design products, and that's how we talk about it with other people. So if you like this conversation, I do co-host a podcast with one of Henry's and my associates, Jason Sirocco, and we have new episodes every week. It's called Root Causes, a PKI and Security podcast. We have more than 300 episodes up today, and we're putting new ones up all the time. It's available in all the places that you listen to podcasts, and we're going to talk about all sorts of things involved in digital certificates, CLM, encryption, post-quantum crypto, digital identities, passwordless, and stuff like that. And you can come listen to us, listen to our topics, either hear the current ones, subscribe, go back and hear the old ones. We'd love to have you come join us. And with that, I think we're ready for questions. Leah, do we have any questions?
We do have some, yes, thank you both.
Okay.
The first question came up when you mentioned pinning quite at the beginning of the presentation. What is pinning?
Henry, what is pinning?
So pinning is effectively sticking a certificate that is always being presented on a given system or an application so that it never changes. And it always has to be that specific certificate. If it's not that certificate, when you go and access a site, it could give you an error. That's the idea of pinning a given certificate to an application or to a website.
And why do people pin, Henry? What's the rationale behind it?
Because some organizations tend to issue the same cert from different vendors and they want to have a compliancy, and they've had problems in the past, and that's how they solve the problem without realizing that it may have short-term benefits but long-term headaches.
Yeah, and it sometimes it's deemed to be more secure. People think that if somebody were to get into my network and somehow reroute my traffic, that certificate on the other end would be different. It wouldn't be the certificate we were pinned to, and therefore it would thwart that attack. And this is a very kind of 2000s thinking, if you will. This was considered to be a valid security practice 15 years ago. But the need for agility, which has radically changed since that time, has really completely undermined pinning. The likelihood that pinning to certificates makes you actually prevents a security event is much less than the likelihood that pinning to the certificates creates an outage event, right?
Yep.
And so we very strongly recommend against it. We do not believe that it is a good practice. We strongly discourage it because it creates problems like the ones we described.
Great.
Okay.
The next question was, does the new fifth pillar represent a change in the industry or just a change how we at Segtigo are thinking about it?
Oh, that's a good one. I think some of both. I think we have seen the value and the importance of ecosystem integration grow, certainly over the last 10 years and even over the last 5. And at the same time, I think we have been listening to the market and we have heard increasing interest, I'd say, and awareness of the value of having your CLM tied into the other things that you're doing. So I do think it's some of both. What do you think, Henry?
I think it's that too. And also to your point of listening to some of our customers, some of them do so much work and not realize that automation and the fifth pillar is absolutely needed, because while we like to do hard work, but some of those hard work eventually become mundane tasks that should have been automated.
Yeah, and remember, it's not just CLM. Other spaces are growing and increasing and improving too. So the capabilities that you have and the comprehensive support that you have and the US experience that you have in your other adjacent platforms is also evolving.
Mhm.
And the way that CLM drives them or they drive CLM needs to evolve as they themselves become more robust and more capable.
Okay, great. The next question is this, and by this I think it means the 5 pillars, are the 5 pillars applicable to all certs that we might issue?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, pretty much. I mean, cert is a big term. So I would say absolutely these principles could apply to everything that you would have that you might call a certificate, because certificates by their nature have to be provisioned, have to be installed correctly, have to meet rules, have to be replaced over time. There are many things we could call a certificate, and my best example of this is probably a verified mark certificate, a VMC. So VMCs, they have the word certificate in them, they expire, they have to be installed, they have to be installed in the right place. But a VMC isn't really a PKI element, right? It's to identify your logo in an email using DMARC. It's just a fundamentally different thing. So do these principles apply to a VMC? Sure. But you could also kind of separate your VMCs out and say, well, I could manage them separately, right? And arguably they're a horse of a different color. So I think these principles are abstract in general and definitely apply to every certificate. I would say that certain types of certificates, they're going to be much more important for than others, right? So
Yep.
for instance, code signing certs still expire, still need to be managed and monitored, but code signing certs don't get installed on servers the way TLS certs do, or installed on mail clients the way SMIME certs do. And so a code signing cert, these principles still apply, but they're probably a little lighter weight.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. This
Yeah.
also applies to other certificate types that hasn't reached that, we'll call it maturity level of key rotation or the validity period. But
Right.
eventually, to your point, Tim, these all still fall under the 5 pillars, whether it is on a very heavy basis or on a lighter basis.
Yeah. So for instance, obviously the big one is your SSL certs, your TLS certs, public or private. Those ones, like, yeah, got to get that stuff right. That's where these 5 pillars really apply. The other ones, I still think the framework is very useful. You just need to kind of go into it with a sort of a sophisticated palette in terms of you're thinking about how they're connected to the actual real use case of the cert in real life. What else?
Great. Next question is, what if my environment doesn't support automatic installation of certificates?
Right, because they don't all, right, Henry?
Yep. So in that case, I would say if in your environment, if you believe it doesn't support automation, there's always ways to achieve it. If you're running, say, a mainframe, yes, it could be a little bit difficult, but I wouldn't say it's impossible to automate a cert. At the end of the day, there are ways to facilitate the ability for certificate automation. Maybe parts of your organization is a bit more difficult than other, but I wouldn't say that it's impossible.
Okay, great. And then we've got a question, recognizing the benefit of orchestration, how do I put that in place?
Yeah, I think a lot of this has to be done by your vendors. So if you want so if we use an example for us, like SCM integrates with a variety of different platforms. So for instance, it integrates with ServiceNow, right? So you can get the ServiceNow plugin, you can sit inside of ServiceNow, and you can command and control your certificates and drive that through SCM. So that had to be made, like that had to be provided by Sectico or SCM. So if you start looking through what are the various things I might want to integrate with, you're going to really mostly look for those integrations to be done by those providers. Maybe that's something that you could do yourself. Maybe that's something that you could put pressure on the provider and have them do for you. But I think that's probably going to be the primary way that this occurs.
Yep.
What do you think, Henry?
I would agree. I would agree with your answer.
And so it's worth your while, I think, to check and to say, what are the elements of my tech stack, and will they integrate with a CLM that I'm interested in? And or as I'm thinking of adding something new to my tech stack, one of the questions you ask is, will it integrate with my CLM? And then that becomes part of your decision criteria. And again, you might be able to, if that integration isn't there, sorry, Leah, I know if that integration isn't there, you should tell the vendor that you want it, because how vendors make their roadmaps is they get told by the people that they depend on, which is their customers, what those customers want, and that's hugely influential. And so if these integrations aren't there, you should talk to the vendor and you should say, I would like this. You should talk on both sides. Talk to the CLM, but also talk to the other provider, right? Talk to the SIM provider and say, I would like this. This is something we want. And the more that you're vocal about those needs, the more those things make it onto roadmaps or get accelerated, get pulled earlier onto roadmaps and get delivered to you.
Great. We've just got a very interesting question just come in as well. If we're starting from zero in terms of CLM, how could you determine how long it would take to mature the discipline within the organization?
Wow.
Wow.
Want to take a crack at that, Henry?
I would, I'll
I
be honest, it is also dependent on the size of your organization. As anyone on this call or this webinar is listening, the larger the organization, the longer it would take. That's a very, very difficult. There's
great
no
one.
one size fit all answer, if that makes
And
sense.
I'm going to say also part of this is maturity is going to come in stages. It's not a binary thing. So you may find that you can very quickly get to the point, you should very quickly get to the point where you're achieving some very significant benefits from a CRM where you're very happy that it's part of your tech stack. But that doesn't mean you're done, right? And you can continue maturing. You can look at optimizing your spend. You can look at optimizing your processes. You can look at increasing your level of discovery and certificate inclusion. One of the things I don't think we even talked about rogue certs. We always talk about rogue certificates, which is you get groups inside of the organization that are basically shadow IT, and they create systems and services. And part of what they do to do that is they could just go buy certs somewhere. They just go buy them and retail off some website. And these are what we call rogue certs. And these certs get stood up on services. They start actually making those services work correctly. The organization depends on those services. And then somewhere along the line, the certificate that nobody's paying attention to expires, and now you have a problem, right? And so part of maturing is teaching the organization that rogue certs are not okay. Part of maturing is finding the rogue certs that are inevitably going to occur anyway and bringing them under your visibility and management. And so these things will happen. It's not just going to be a sudden flip the switch, it's done kind of thing. They're going to come in stages. It's going to be like concentric circles that are going to spread outward and outward and outward as you get better and better coverage. And as that occurs, you'll find that the benefits you're getting are going up and up and up. So with your caveat, Henry, which I agree with, which is that this is incredibly variable, I would say you should set your sights on getting immediate benefits that are making it well worth your while in very short order, a few months, where you're confident that the certs that you have under your management and control are being handled in a much better way, that they're more reliably installed, that revocations will be handled much more reliably, and that you will have a, if not automatic renewal and installation, at least clear visibility on the renewals that are coming and whether or not they've been done. And that is a short-term ambition that you can have very quickly because it's entirely in your control. As you try to expand your institutional maturity, I love that word. Whoever asked that question, it's a great word. As you're trying to expand your institutional maturity, it's going to be about socializing this. It's going to be about expanding your coverage on discovery and finding those certs and bringing them in. And that's one of the other things that I've heard from CIOs, CISOs, that one of the big things they like about certificate discovery is it helps them get a control on things. As they find these certs, they bring them under their own management. And guess what? Those rogue certs also come with rogue systems. They come with rogue servers and rogue cloud processes and rogue domain names and all kinds of other things that are going to be a problem for you too. And so they can bring all of that stuff under their management and their control. And that certificate discovery, in a way, is it's how they can infiltrate these shadow IT sections of the company and bring them into the fold. And in that sense, sorry for the long-winded answer, but in that sense, the maturation process really is never done, because you've always got these other groups that are out there that fancy themselves to be technically astute, that are making moves and making changes. You always have rogue systems. You always have shadow IT. These are just part of the modern environment. And this is an ongoing, continuous tool, one of your tools, to keep bringing those things under management and under control. So sorry for the long-winded answer.
Brilliant. I think It's a very good point to stop. We've run out of questions and out of time, so
Excellent.
good timing. Thank you everyone for your time, and thanks Henry and Tim. If you've got any more questions, do get in touch with us. This is our last webinar of 2023, but don't worry, we've got more lined up for 2024. Keep an eye on our website for more details, and thank you for watching today.